everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Crymson. I am, as am always, Crymson Pleasure, and with me is Margot Kavendek.
Hi.
Kavendek. Deck?
Kavendek.
Kavendek.
Yes.
It's Margot. This is other
Hi.
Margot.
Meeting of Margot's.
And it's spelled the same, too. Which...
Yeah, you don't run into that very often.
No, there's a...
T? What?
Yes. Vonri says, "Hi, Margot, I miss you."
Hi, I miss you.
There's another Margot who streams, and I started following her because her name is Margot, but it's without the T. So she doesn't count. She's Margot adjacent. Okay, so today we were talking about autism. Margot is one of my several friends who have, my adult friends who have autism. Which I will point out, yes, there are two Margot's Rage, you should run. I will point out quickly that I did not, unless Margot had told me, which she had, I would have had no idea. So, this is going to be very good. It's going to be very interesting. If you weren't with us last week we were talking with Kink Nightmare about her son who is nonverbal autistic, and the cutest child in the world, the cutest boy in the world, because I have the cutest girl, but he is the cutest boy in the entire world, and I adore him. So, and then just as a warning, if anything at all becomes triggering for any of you guys in chat, feel free to leave. We understand that we are going to be talking about things that could be sensitive or upsetting at any point. So please make sure that that you don't feel you have to stay. But we love your faces, and we hope that you have a fun time hanging out. So, hi Margot.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Can't complain.
Good.
I hope everybody else is having a wonderful day.
Everybody has to be having a wonderful day.
It's mandatory.
It's mandatory. Thursdays, everybody's supposed to have a good day.
Well, be all cliche and be like, it's closer to Friday.
It's the pre-Friday. You can't have a bad pre-Friday. So we're here to talk about autism. And were you clinically diagnosed with autism?
I was, and I was an interesting but not uncommon case that I was diagnosed into, like, well into my adulthood. I got my official clinical diagnosis when I was 20. Okay. And this was after, my entire life of being poked and prodded and evaluated by, child study team, and, just always just kind of falling into this category of just being a very odd child and not being, my family just couldn't figure me out, kind of thing. So it was just one of those things, like right around when I was 20, my sister was in college. She was going to school for, she wanted to be an elementary school teacher, and part of that you have to go for like child psychology courses and things. And in talking to her psychologist, she kind of hit her professor, excuse me. She hit on something and kind of like called me that day and was just like, "Hey, I think you might have Asperger's syndrome. Here's the name of a clinical psychologist in New York City that my professor gave me. You're going to go make an appointment with it." Like, she basically told me I had to do all of the things. And that was fun. Being 20 years old in 2009, trying to navigate the New York City subway system by myself for the first time ever in my life, to go see a strange doctor. Yeah.
Who's going to tell you fun things?
Yeah. And I wish I could tell you anything about the details of like the evaluation. The one thing I remember specifically was that he had a binder that he laid out, and it had like photographs of people making certain facial expressions. And I was tasked to basically say what I was interpreting this person was feeling based on the expression that they were making.
Okay.
And that's a pretty common thing because just with autism, trying to read and interpret social interaction is a lot more challenging. So, being able to read facial expression, being able to express, yourself physically, it's it's challenging. So that's the only one that I remember specifically, but it was a brief diagnosis, and he was just basically like, "Yep, you're on the spectrum somewhere." And I wrote a $200 check and walked out. That was it, really. But it was something my sister really urged me to do before my dad's insurance ran out. So like I didn't really follow through on anything beyond that, mostly because the anxiety involved with it, I just couldn't handle.
Yeah. But
and
were
also,
you? Go ahead.
it also just kind of boiled down to the resources back then for adult autism were a lot more limited than they are today. So, it wasn't something that I felt I was able to pursue in the same way that I would be now.
Okay.
So.
That makes sense. So my question is, did you feel like a weight lifted with the diagnosis of autism?
It was nice to give the beast a name, so to speak. Like I said, I'd always been an unusual child. I've always been told I was weird. I never quite fit in with anybody, even my closest friends. I never really felt like they honestly truly got me. So it was always kind of like, why am I like this? And so having a name for that just kind of was like, wow, okay. And at first I kind of ended up using it as a crutch, I guess, kind of throwing all of my shortcomings on it and being like, well, yeah, I'm a bad person because I'm autistic, that kind of thing. I'm like, I suck at human interaction, I'm autistic, that. And so a lot of that was, learning to let go of the negative aspect of it and trying to figure out, who I am as, a person overall, just because I'm autistic. And it's a growing process, still learning.
Autism isn't any disorder, mental illness, or anything like that isn't a simple like, oh well, this is the key. That's not. Unfortunately, yeah, it's never like, oh well, I completely understand everything.
Thanks,
now.
I'm cured.
Therapists would not have any jobs.
No.
But it's nice to just have that diagnosis so you can go forward and be like, okay, here is the new path in front of me. What do I do now? Like, where do I take this path? Where do I go from it? But it's nice just having that path in front of you, and instead of continuing to like walk through the underbrush, and figure out life. So we talked about you and I briefly mentioned how there's no real concrete definition for autism. But this is going to be a weird question. Do you know what the difference between having Asperger's is to any other form of autism?
See, I was looking into that recently because there's a lot of debate in the autism community, the people, actually autistic people, of whether or not Asperger's syndrome is a valid diagnosis these days, because of the diversity of the autism spectrum, which it also feels like that's a misnomer as well, because when people think spectrum, they think like an A, B, like a sliding scale, when in reality, when it comes to autism, it's such like it's a really kind of an umbrella diagnosis. It's sort of like an XY axis, and you kind of fall anywhere on that. And that can change with people on a given day, so even like the labels of like high functioning or low functioning can, change for a person on a given day. One day you can be more of the like high functioning towards a neurotypical mindset, I guess, and then other days, like some people can just go from that to being completely nonverbal, and it's very diverse, it's very complicated, it's wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff.
Yes.
So and it's weird how it's, the advances in the research and everything, and like the way that autistic people are being treated how that makes things clearer, but at the same time ends up muddying the water because we're finding just how different, all of these autism spectrum disorders can be.
And
So,
and just very much like other disorders and mental illnesses, just because
mhm.
one person who's autistic even has the same diagnosis is not going to experience the same thing as somebody else who
Right,
is
right.
autistic. So I feel that, and I speak about this frequently in all of my shows, is that I feel that media itself really screws up our interpretation
Hmm.
of what autism is, specifically. And whereas there is I caught an episode or two of I mildly paid attention, put it that way. I mildly paid attention to the good doctor, who is
Mm.
who is an autistic doctor who also happens to be a savant when it comes to remembering things. So the first assumption I saw people making were like, "Oh, well, autistic people are obviously savants."
Yeah.
That's not how that works.
Big common misconception is that like every autistic person is a savant or like is incredibly gifted in some way, and it's just not necessarily the case. I think where that comes from is so a very common trait with most autistic people is the like a very obsessive tendency towards a special interest. So they like something and they cling to it and they just obsess over every little detail, take on every like they know everything about bottom left to right.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of like a lot of situations that manifests as like a talent or a special ability or something like. And yeah, the memory thing, it's very common with autistic people to have eidetic memories, having very good memory
Mm-hmm.
um, at the same time. It's also, it's like in my case, I have very good memory for like number sequences I'm really good at.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can remember. I have very strong like attachments to memories from my past that I can remember fine details from that nobody else remembers.
Mm-hmm.
But my short-term memory is shot. If I don't have a list when I go to a store, I don't know what I'm there for.
You're like, and I brought
Which
home a
gets me,
puppy.
yeah, it gets me in trouble in Target. Target's a dangerous place for me to go without a list.
Target's a dangerous place in general. Without a list, you're
Yeah,
just like, here's my credit card, and go
Cartwheel has
spend
been a
money.
blessing and a curse. But yeah, so that sort of the special interest thing does sort of manifest itself as like the savant talent thing, but that's not always the case.
Yes.
And I think that also there's a huge social stigma surrounding autism, and it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And also just in general with people who have disabilities or mental disorders and things like that, how you can manage to be useful in a neurotypical society. And if you're not a genius, if you're not advanced in some way, it's like you don't have any usefulness.
Yeah.
So I think it's like people want autistic people to have that special ability because otherwise how are they actually autistic? I don't know.
Yeah.